Welcome into another hour here on CBS Sports HQ. Jeremy St. Louis, happy to have you along. We're talking Lakers to get things rolling with NBA writer Bill Reiter and our NBA champion, the coach Avery Johnson. Guys, let's start at the top with the Russell Westbrook news, opting in for the final year of his $206 million deal. It's a $47 million opt-in. Coach, this was not unexpected.
No, there's no surprise. When you look at players opting into a contract, especially for one more year, that's primarily because there's no market for them don't opt in and become an unrestricted free agent. So Russell Westbrook, the same way Kyrie Irving, just didn't have many options, and this was his best available option. I'm not saying that the Lakers were thrilled that he opted in, but if he would have tried to test the free agency market, I think they would have been okay with that. Darvin Ham, his new coach, said that he wants to get Westbrook back playing like he was, when he was an MVP. I don't know if he'll ever get back to that level of play, and he wants to get him playing at a high level on defense. That remains to be seen. But this was Russell Westbrook's only option and his best option, so there's no surprise here.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Jeremy, you said it. Not a surprise. Very good news for Russell Westbrook because he had access to that $47 million and change player option. He has obviously, at least over the course of the last few seasons, digressed as a player in terms of his impact. And even though it's expected, I can tell you, talking to some Lakers folks earlier today, not happy news for the Los Angeles Lakers. Because as long as there's hope, you can imagine a world where things are exactly as you want them to be. There was never a scenario where Russell Westbrook was not going to opt into this contract into this final year. But I can tell you, and Lakers officials knew that, but it didn't mean deep down, guys, deep in their heart, deep in their basketball soul. They weren't hoping maybe Russell Westbrook had his own change of heart. Go do something else, retire, take less money, move to some other. He decides he likes the winter, go somewhere else. Not an easy day for the Lakers. They knew it was coming, but it solidifies what we already knew was going to be true. Very difficult offseason in terms of free agency for the Lakers now.
Well, and the Lakers, they were hoping to trade him. There was even talk that he could be part of a deal for Kyrie, depending on how that situation went. But, of course, that ended with Kyrie opting in as well. He could still be dealt. So, Bill, what's the best case scenario for a suitor for Westbrook?
Yeah, so if you're the Lakers, and I've talked to some sources around the NBA, there's real skepticism with the best case scenario that I'm going to give to you, but I'll give it to you. And that is the Pacers. That you try to convince the Pacers to send out some of those other players and build around a young team. It would mean that Indiana would basically have to go through a partial rebuild. And because that contract does have value if you decide that you want to rebuild and and the Lakers attach, and they don't want to do this, a first round pick to it or some other assets, right? Some other things come in return. That contract goes off the books next year for whoever has him. So the Pacers, I think, guys, are the only place that I can close my eyes and squint and sort of pretend to see a suitor for Russell Westbrook. And you do that if you're the Pacers on the idea of a rebuild and maybe pretend in public with the media on the idea of we're going to try to get the best out of Westbrook and compete while we go through this process. But honestly, that's the only answer I can give you. And I'm not even sure to the degree to which I 100% believe that's a realistic outcome.
The Lakers' big three, they only had 21 games together. They went 11-10. So if you're new head coach Darvin Ham, Coach, what's your plan to get them working well together?
Well, it starts with getting them healthy. I think the key is Anthony Davis. If Anthony Davis is not healthy and LeBron James is not healthy, it's not going to work. This team can survive a couple of games, even if Westbrook is unavailable, but they can't compete in the Western Conference with the top teams of the Golden State Warriors and the Phoenix Suns, the Dallas Mavericks, the Memphis Grizzlies. The Pelicans are coming. We'll see what happens with teams like Utah and Denver, but they got to get healthy. So their off-season training program, their sports medicine department is going to be a huge key. And then we can talk about them playing with better conditioning and better pace, as Darvin Ham alluded to in his press conference. And they're going to have to significantly improve defensively. And you got to have Anthony Davis available to be your last line of defense, especially when he's at the 5 position. And you got to have Westbrook, picking up a little bit more full court and putting pressure on these ball handlers and harassing them instead of picking them up at the 3-point line or inside the 3-point line. So I think it all starts with the state of mind, but also physically, how healthy is this team going to be next year?
Okay, so now that Russ is there, earlier, we highlighted 3 problems last season: defense, shooting, and chemistry. So in free agency, let's start on defense. Who can help, Bill?
Okay, so I've got some names for you. I just want to point out again the waking nightmare that is the Lakers cap reality is what they have is the mid-level exception and not even the full exception. They're in the luxury tax, so it's the luxury tax mid-level exception, which is a bunch of fancy words for they can pay one guy $6 million a year and everyone else minimums is what they're going to have to do. Not even the $10 million mid-level, but defensively, Kyle Anderson, I think, because what I think the Lakers have to do is they're going to have to find guys who maybe take a little bit less than what they're worth, right? Guys that are worth 7 or 8 or 9, and say Los Angeles, California, the Los Angeles Lakers, LeBron James and Anthony Davis, a really well-respected young head coach, and a belief that we can be more competitive than maybe the rest of the NBA. Okay, all that said, Kyle Anderson, I think, is a guy that is interesting. He's an excellent defensive player. He's coming off, if I remember right, guys, I think in the neighborhood of 4-year, $40 million deal, maybe even more than that. So this is somebody who has made a little bit more money. He did not outperform that contract. Not a bad player, he's a fine player, but those are the kind of guys the Lakers are going to have to target, people who did not outperform contracts, who there won't be bidding wars for, and who maybe are worth a little bit more than what the Lakers can afford, but would like to, for all the reasons I just talked about, come and be a part of the Los Angeles Lakers for in that $6 million a year range.
Yeah, I love that idea of Kyle Anderson. And there are other guys. You can consider guys like Gary Payton II, who just won an NBA championship with the Golden State Warriors. Gary Payton II is a lockdown defensive specialist. He had an amazing run, even after getting injured with a severe injury in that Memphis series. But Gary Payton II can help this team. You can look at guys like Nicholas Batum, who just opted out of his contract with the Los Angeles Clippers. The main thing is you need length. You need guys that can defend the first 3 dribbles. And when you get guys that can defend the first 3 dribbles, like a Gary Payton II, and then be able to convert and run on the fast break and finish in the lane as he does, that would be a amazing opportunity for Gary Payton II to go to Los Angeles and play with LeBron and try to win a championship, even though there'll be a little bit more of a long shot than the Warriors repeating. But I would try to overpay Gary Payton II with the mid-level exception and try to lure him to Los Angeles.
So much limitation in terms of what you can do with the numbers there. So it's going to be certainly a challenge for Darvin Ham. Chemistry, getting them on the right page, going to be important. 9-1 to win the West. Double that to win the title. So 18-1. How much do you think that those odds can realistically change through free agency, Bill?
I think it's unlikely. I think the names that Coach just gave us are really good ones. There's other guys Gary Harris is a guy that I would throw out there as an interesting fit. But in talking to sources, including some Lakers sources, especially Lakers sources, when I ask them about sort of their plans in free agency, they say a lot of nice things, rainbows and puppy dogs, and life is great. And then they get to the fact of the matter, which is that they can add one guy of any level of significance, and it's limited on the mid-level exception. And they need exactly what Avery talked about earlier. They need LeBron James healthy. They need Anthony Davis healthy. And they need Russell Westbrook. Again, this is not necessarily likely to be much more effective than he was. Their odds for winning an NBA championship and the ability for people who bet on the Lakers to make some money off of those bets will hinge largely on the players already on the roster.
All right, NBA writer Bill Reiter, as well as the coach and NBA champion Avery Johnson, joining us here on HQ to talk about the situation with the Los Angeles Lakers. Obviously, lots of challenges ahead. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Good to see you, as always. So in terms of the Lakers' past 10 seasons, you can see, on top of the challenging roster, they've only won the title once, missed the playoffs a lot over the past 10 seasons. Now it's on to Darvin Ham. How does he adjust things through free agency, limited free agency, in order to get this team back into title contention?
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.